Matt Nagle, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start by asking you about your connection to the Palo Alto district, the fact that you moved to Marin, and now you've just recently, in the last few months, have moved back to Palo Alto. And yet you have expressed some pretty harsh criticism of the way this particular board has dealt with minority and underrepresented students. But you haven't been here for the last, since what, 2012, when you were principal at Juana Briones. So I'm wondering if you could describe your concerns and what they're based on.
Well, one, I've been here for around 35 years. From when I started teaching tennis at tennis camp in Stanford for 10, 11 years. I got to see the happenings in the district, the blowing up of the fountain at Gunn, the issues with politics at Ravenswood, specifically with black students. And as far as me being in Marin, I left for Marin in 2012, but I was here most weekends. My wife stayed here and taught at Escondido Elementary. My son stayed here, went to Escondido Elementary. I never really left. But I was deep in Marin, but we always had the home here in Palo Alto. And my wife did work actually in Marin for a couple years and came right back to Escondido Elementary because they always need quality Spanish immersion teachers like herself. So the politics, education of Palo Alto, everything in the city never left me, and I never left it. But I did work in Marin, some of the best administrative years in my life, and I got to really go deep into helping BIPOC students, Black, Indigenous, people of color. BIPOC students really excel, and not in the sense of smarter balanced assessment from one year to the next. Look at they went up 5%, but actually helping kids matriculate through the grade levels. To finally being there long enough to see some of my students graduate. One get into Stanford. My daughter was a student. She got into Yale. That wouldn't have happened in Palo Alto. She would have been overlooked. She would have been seen as another Mexican-American kid doing decent, so why bother? A bunch of my students got into Berkeley as well. We just had so much success there that I ran for Marin County Superintendent of Schools 2 years ago. Now I'm back here full-time. And I'm currently a student at Cal State University East Bay, Educational Leadership for Social Justice. It's a doctoral program. I have time to run for school board. It's my duty as a citizen, a resident, a voter of Palo Alto to actually do this. It is difficult. And as far as the harsh criticisms that you mentioned, I don't consider them harsh whatsoever. As a principal, I'm accustomed to being criticized. When the flag doesn't fly properly, it's my fault. When a window breaks somewhere, it's my fault. That's what leadership is about. It's all going to be your fault. First world leadership. Apologies to A Bug's Life movie. That's where I got that from. But it's not harsh whatsoever. These are grown adults. They have a difficult job to lead. I hope to be in that same position and add value to the board, add value to this district, add value to Palo Alto with a diverse perspective.
So before we move on to some specific issues, I want to ask a couple of follow-ups. But first I want to explain to our viewers that we are in the garage of our office building, and we have a nursery school right next to us. So you're going to hear some kids in the background, which are just kids having fun next to each other.
And after 30 years in education, I'm unfazed by it.
It's the right kind of background noise for an interview for a school board position. In the controversy that you experienced in Marin, which had to do with a lawsuit that you filed because you felt you had been retaliated against as a result of running for county superintendent of schools, and you were demoted essentially from the principal position to going back to a K through second grade elementary school. You were successfully able to settle that lawsuit for $700,000.
That's right.
So good for you. My question is, upon leaving that district, you said at the time that you would be looking for another principal position. So my question is that your intent currently to resume being an administrator at a local school here? How does that fit into your interest in serving on the school board?
So I think you're talking about career plans, and since May and actually April is when I started investigating something I knew about, I learned about in 2004, which was this doctoral program. It was just getting off the ground. And I saw an opportunity with COVID as well. Everything changed with the shutdown. Everything was shut down state nationwide. And so I took that different direction that I had not planned for, which is to get my doctorate. I'll have it in 3 years. And it's in something dear to me, social justice, much like my undergraduate degree, journalism and Mexican American studies over at UC Santa Cruz. So I'm sitting this year out, 2021. I don't need to be in it. I know I want things to die down first. And if I choose to go back, it would be, I may look in 2021, 12 months from now, essentially. I'm a capable administrator, always have been. That was never the issue in my former district. The issue was that I took on the most powerful politician in Marin County. And there are consequences for that. Thanks to my daughter, she didn't want to let it go. I was fine. I said, hey, I love teaching. It was a transitional kindergarten, first and second grade. I had a visually impaired student there who needed a one-on-one aid. I think I was sent there to fail, and I did the opposite. That tends to be my outcome in education. I love education, so that's why I want to get on the school board, because I have a lot to add. And that school board, judging by last night's board meeting, they need another voice. They clearly need another voice. They clearly need somebody with my experience. Nobody has my wealth of experience in education. And so I think if we have a meritocracy, I'm going to be on there.
Just one more question about the background, and then we'll move on. You were quoted in the Marin Independent Journal when the settlement of your case was announced as saying that you might come back and run again for that position in 2022.
That's right.
Have your plans changed?
I wouldn't say my plans changed. I said that at the time in late February. And I said that to put that, my opponent, who really had never run against anybody, I was the first one, to make sure that she knows that she's not out of it yet. And so I think most people understood that. If I'm on the school board, 2022, 4-year term, obviously that doesn't happen. I'm committing to a 4-year term. I'm going to be here. I'm looking at COVID, and it looks like we're not going anywhere. So things have changed.
So on the topic of the board's relationship with the superintendent, you say on your website, I don't meddle, I don't micromanage, I evaluate one employee. But you also seek to understand stakeholders, especially families of historically underrepresented. So tell me what leadership looks like as a board member, exercising proper oversight, getting voices heard, but also keeping them accountable.
So what I bring to the board, I can give you 2 cases of this summer. We just ended. One was the hiring of a district administrator from the East Bay with a lot of baggage. And you guys reported that, I don't know, something happened in Juana Briones that I somehow fired a librarian. That never happened that way. But it's still baggage. I carry that. It comes with leadership. But I thought it was very insensitive to not just our Asian community, but anybody that cares about BIPOC relations, communities. And so one thing I would bring to the board in terms of leadership is I wouldn't let that kind of hiring come up to the board. I think it was unfair to the board to have to decide right then and there. Also, when I said I wouldn't meddle, and that was written 2 months ago, out of the blue, we have, I don't want to mention his name, but we have a school board member saying he's doing an extrajudicial background check. And now, as Bill said, if I'm going to apply for an administrative position, is this board member going to be doing extra informal checks with special people that he knows as a human resources practice? In no way would that be a best practice. Leadership, in that case, looks like let the staff do their job. Let the human resources staff do their job. It's not a board member's duty, and it's not even in their purview to go do background checks like that. And so that would be one case. The second case is this plan that was brought to the board last night. It seemed to be half-baked. Now, A good board member is going to be having ongoing conversations with his or her colleagues, number one. There's 4 others. It's got to be a team. And number 2, that one employee that you supervise, the superintendent, well, I'm going to have hopefully an ongoing dialogue as a normal board member and anticipate issues with a half-baked plan like that. I mean, clearly when you have over 100 speakers spending a couple hours complaining about parts of the plan and lack of planning, that should have been handled before. That should have not reached the board in that way. And I think a lot of this discontent could have been headed off at the pass, so to speak.
So to clarify, then, you would, in those situations, discuss the issue and try to persuade the superintendent not to bring it up.
Through my experience, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, to delay the board formal review of that particular issue and do more background work?
Well, I have the experience to anticipate that that's going to come up. And anybody with enough administrative experience, 20 years, 30 years, they know that there's a cycle, there's a rhythm to how all this stuff works, and you learn to anticipate problems before they arise. And it was just, those 2 examples in themselves are a bit shocking that they're still happening. That shouldn't happen. That should not be put on the board. And so you saw the board just sit there, and it looked like they didn't really know what to do at that point, except, I mean, Ken Dauber wanted to take a quick vote, and I think he said, we're just going to approve this anyway. I thought that's what I heard, but I don't know for sure.
There was extensive debate last night at the school board meeting about when and whether to reopen schools. Do you support the district's plan to start reopening schools in October? And if not, why? And also, how would you reconcile these really strong differences in opinions among teachers, parents, administrators on how to reopen schools?
Yeah. Well, and again, I don't know if we can, anybody, I don't know if we can blame the board, but I mean, who else is in charge of that but the board? But you heard something that my wife's been telling me. She's at a school site, so she comes home and you know, natural husband and wife talking, hey, how was your day kind of thing. And yeah, so when I heard last night from a teacher saying, you know what, I'm expected to work tomorrow, Monday, the 28th, okay, that's just a few days. You know, some kids are going back on the 28th. And she said publicly, I only have one mask. I only have, and not a shield. I only have one shield, and it's a disposable shield that I'm supposed to throw away after one day. I heard a disconnect. I heard one administrator say, boy, we've got mountains and mountains of PPE. We've got tons of it. In fact, there's pictures of it, okay? And we put in the order forms. And it just seemed to be like, you're really protesting a bit much. You're really throwing a lot here to the public. But then you're having teachers say, where's our PPE? Where's our dividers for the classroom? And so that came off as a disconnect. Either those teachers are wrong or the administrators were wrong. But clearly, what we heard last night, that should have been something we should have been hammering through a month ago. Other districts, if we want to compare to other districts, there's a few other districts who are a bit ahead. I'm hearing that some schools in San Mateo County, different county, I get it, are beginning a little faster. I also know that one of my former districts in the San Jose area, they got a waiver, and so they're ready to go, but they haven't gone yet. They haven't pulled the trigger. So I am in favor of returning to school as soon as we can. I'd like my son to be in school. I think he should at least be going back for small group learning. I think you heard a few teachers say it would be nice to have once a day small group learning. But in its current form, that plan is half-baked. In its current form, that plan has not convinced the employees or the public that this is a good plan and we're ready to pull the trigger right now. It's not ready. And so I want to get my son back as fast as possible, but I want it to be as safe as possible for my wife who is teaching. And right now, it is not safe enough. It'll never be fully safe, but it has to be safe enough.
I'm not clear exactly on what you think is half-baked about the plan and what you would change if you were on the board and you were at that meeting last night. What changes would you propose to it in order for the phased return to take place?
Well, number one, we would have been talking about that plan way back in August, early August. I saw other districts because, you know, I'm an education nerd. I watch other districts on their board meetings, and they were just having this type of discussion with conflicts, with problems, with debate over a month ago. It seemed I thought I kept hearing from Don Austin that the plan is coming in a week. In fact, he even said in his Monday address that we're not going to have much to discuss tomorrow, but next week we're going to have a lot. And so now I'm seeing a pattern of next week. And so number one, I would have had the discussion long ago. Number two, I would have done a much better job of communicating with the public. I heard that one board member went to Duveneck PTA, spilled the beans, and then my wife got an email from the union the next day, it was last Tuesday, that, hey, we're going back October 12th, and they're going to phase everybody in. And then Don Austin had to send a rushed email on Wednesday saying, hey, this cat's out of the bag. So as a board member, I would hold Don Austin, who would be my one employee, to a higher standard. Because what's happening now, I don't see how anybody in Palo Alto can say, this is okay, this is good enough. It's not good enough. Much like Ken Dauber saying we can be better, I remember that back in 2012, we should be better. We should have been a lot better by now. And so we've had 7 months to come up with a plan that you and I and all community members can get around and understand and support, but we don't. We don't even have that plan yet. That is universally, not even majority supported. So I do support us going back to school, and now after reading a lot of research, there is one key thing that I'm looking at, and I'm going over that side. I'm not seeing the value of a hybrid schedule as much as I was. I'm looking at my wife teaching. Don says it's only one cohort. On his Monday address, he says one cohort. He says just divide it into A and B. However, that really is two cohorts. I don't know how you can say it's just one cohort, but that's almost double the exposure for my wife and all teachers, all classified workers, all administrators. And so I don't see the hybrid. I read an article in Washington Post last month. There's a lot of epidemiologists, one from Harvard, who's saying it doesn't make sense because they're going to go to school, they're going to go home, and they're going to have a third place of exposure, playing with kids, that kind of thing, as opposed to if it's just one everyone coming every day, then you'd have them going to school and going to home, going to school and going to home. So I don't think the hybrid is going to bring the safety that we think it's going to bring. It looks confusing. And so that's one key area that I'm leaning now towards for lack of a better word, a whole class in-person instruction. I don't have a noun for that to describe it, but I'm leaning away from the hybrid model now.
So given all the craziness around reopening, if you were to be transported to next June and kind of look back at this year, I'm wondering what metrics you would have for success to say, okay, in the end, this all worked out great. How would you evaluate it based on what?
There's not going to be, success is going to be defined as, how do I put this? They're all bad options, okay? It's not a normal year. There won't be any celebration of success. It's a year of surviving. That's it. So this will not be a year, I think, where we're going to have widespread successes in saying, wow, we did a great job at this. COVID has revealed a lack of leadership at the local, state, and national level. And that's too bad. And I say that in a way to take pressure off of the superintendent, pressure off of the board. It's hard, and there are not a lot of good answers out there. You're going to take the best solution you can find, but it's not going to be a success. So if I look at June 21, my son, my daughter, all his friends, all her colleagues, it's a matter of survival. Did we get through this year? And we should already be thinking about a plan for 21, 22, because it doesn't look like this is going away. If we listen to the scientists and the experts, it's not going away with a magic vaccine. This is a new normal for the next couple of years.
So you've been in touch with the district, even though you've been living in Marin.
Oh.
And I want to know, in what areas do you think the district has improved under Don Austin versus Max McGee, and which areas it perhaps has declined? Yeah,
Max McGee was another Kevin Skelly, and it was Kevin's first superintendency, so you've got to give him some leeway there. Max McGee came in, and he came in, I have to think of good words. They're not bad words, But he came in as, let's just say, a showman, okay? And he juggled this ball and juggled that ball and forgot about the core mandate, which is instruct our students. That's the core mandate. And, a few years later, he had forgotten about the raise, and he and Scott Bowers forgot about that. And so finally, that was enough to really have a push for getting the basic responsibilities of running a school district down. And that goes back to 2012 when the Weekly and Ken Dauber were, from our outsiders' viewpoint, we're really putting pressure on the board. In fact, we're really delivering harsh criticisms, if that's the word we're using. And they had to get their OCR mess in check. Then they had to get Title IX in check. The Palo magazine, Verdi, did a great job on rape culture. There's nothing I missed. I wish I had, but this place was churning out news like you wouldn't believe. And everybody in Marin County was saying, did you hear about this? I said, yes, I lived it. We're still there. And it is, they're undergoing some problems. So I have long forgotten about your question. Could you repeat that question again?
So what has Don Austin brought to the district?
Yeah. So he's a different type. McGee was kind of like Skelly, but with 30 years experience. So, but still, that showman part, the superficial part, the symbolic part, wasn't resonating with me, and it didn't resonate with enough people. Don Austin is, I get him. He's more, he has more of an upbringing like I did. He comes from Chula Vista, which is not San Diego, which is not Pacific Beach. And then he went to Moreno Valley. Well, that's where my mom first started teaching, was the outskirts of Moreno Valley, where it was quite challenging. And so Don Austin had that at his core. His core first experiences introduced him to poverty, introduced him to people of color struggling to connect with a school system that, frankly, was systemically racist against them. That's just how it was for my mom, my grandparents, my uncle, and frankly for my brothers and sisters and I, even though we tried to fit in as white as we could because we were half. So Don Austin brings almost a good connection with the most amount of people. He doesn't come off to me as elitist. He comes off as somebody who can connect with a lot of people. And I think that's his greatest strength. And so I value that. What he's struggling with right now is, and I've done this as a principal myself, he's trying to figure out, well, wait a second, if 40% of the people hate this thing, and 40% of the people hate this thing, and 10% don't even care, and again, a good word, well, for lack of a better word, I'm screwed either way. And so, and he even said that in his address, but he didn't use that word. And he said that pretty much last night at the board meeting as well, and he's correct. So what he has to do, and I learned this from my years at Juana Briones, and I learned this in Marin County, you just have to throw all that away. You need to act with integrity, honesty, and you need to do what's inside your core. And you may get attacked for it. You may have to undergo some consequences. Lord knows I have. But in the end, you come out stronger, you come out with integrity, and you are a true leader. And so he has that potential to be that true leader. He's struggling right now. I want to help him.
Those actions you've seen this board take over the last 2 years, which is one that you have the strongest disagreement with, and can you critique it and say what you would have done differently if you were on the board?
Well, they haven't taken a lot of action in the last 2 years. In the 2018 interviews for this newspaper, it was a feel-good moment. People were saying things that are a lot better. And I took that as well, wait a second, things were so bad, and now things are less awful. But the last 2 years, what I've seen is a weird fixation on running the board, running their meetings more for themselves than for the public. And I've seen this in other school boards in Santa Clara County and Marin County and even Alameda County, because that's what I do. 2 points. One, the 2-meeting rule. I thought they got rid of that. I thought I had read that, and they got rid of the 2-meeting rule. Well, great. That Ken Dauber didn't want to do everything twice. He said that publicly. But the problem with that, as a resident, as a voter, as a community member, I'm only going to hear about it from the local newspapers. I'm only going to hear about an issue usually after it's already been brought up. And then I say, wait a second, that's really important to me. I want to come to that second meeting when it's brought up, and I want to give some input or some feedback. So that one kind of shut out people, and it's just anti-democratic. It's a slippery slope at best. At worst, it's just telling people, hey, this is our business. We're going to do it. Tough luck for you. The other one is I don't know if it's a culture, a philosophy, a feeling, but it's shutting out feedback and input again. And I saw it last night. They started the meeting. There was a superintendent's report. Superintendent says, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to give this report a little bit later." Well, it doesn't matter. They approved the agenda. It was an agenda item. The superintendent actually spoke words, and they denied someone their right to speak. And so I'm very big on democratic participation. I'm very big on engaging all of our community. And I don't think that I object vehemently against what they're doing. I don't like meetings till 12. I fell asleep before the meeting ended last night. I'm a little sleepy now because of that. So that's a good thing. On the other hand, they got to balance that out and encourage people to engage, encourage people to participate, and connect with as many communities in our one big community as they can. And I'll leave it at that. But,
I just want to clarify,
please.
the board hasn't eliminated the student meeting rule.
Yeah, and that's what I deduced, because then Ken Dauber said, "Hey, let's can we waive the 2-meeting rule last night?" And that's when the light bulb went on. I said, "Oh, it looks like they still have that rule." But he's made it very clear that he's a proponent of that, and I didn't see enough objection with the school board on that. And if I were on school board, I would make sure we keep that 2-meeting rule and move past that and move on to bigger issues.
One of your big issues in this campaign is closing the achievement gap and addressing the inequities that exist in the different populations. And you, I think you told the Palo Voice that the current board ignores minority and low-income students. You use the word ignores.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that and what precisely you think needs to be different from what this current board practice has been?
So the current board reacted to the issues with George Floyd late May, and in June 9th, I think it was, they adopted a resolution. That was their answer to actually seeing Black, Indigenous, people of color, BIPOC. If you've read that resolution, the first 100 words, it's unlike any other resolution, because most of the school districts pass those, okay? There was no meat, no substance in this resolution, and the first 100 words was all boilerplate, legalese, education code, protecting the district. Say, well, hey, we do this, we don't discriminate against anybody. When I looked at other resolutions around the same time, the June ones, they talked about the harm that our systems, our school system, when I say our, that's a general R for Bay Area, has caused people of color. And so that was a classic example of not seeing the Mexican American on Park Boulevard, where we live. That was a classic example of not seeing the Latino kids in Buena Vista mobile homes. They just don't see them. They see them as a score, a data score, and they see them in a deficit damaged model of where these kids, boy, they're not doing good. And I know it's doing well, but doing good. They're not doing good, so we got to fix them. Well, they don't know their story. They don't go to their homes. They go to their neighbor's home, who with the Tesla in the garage. But they don't go to the folks that are working at Safeway, their homes. They don't go to East Palo Alto, their homes. They don't mix. And so I do say that they have ignored them. I just haven't seen any attention paid to their supposed issue. Every one of the board members' websites, the 2 incumbents and the other 3 candidates, they all talk about equity, and I think I've pushed them to talk more about it. But again, you didn't really hear about that. It wasn't an agenda item last night. It wasn't important. It wasn't an agenda item 2 weeks ago. It wasn't important. It wasn't on the August agenda. It wasn't important. What's on the agenda, what you speak about, that's what's important. Okay, and even this plan wasn't on the agenda a month ago. So that's how I judge if we're seen or not seen. And in the case of my own kids, my daughter as a Mexican-American student in this district, no, she's not seen. And that's a common experience of our Black and Latino students. It's common. That's a really common experience for our Black and Latino families and our parents. Our little house on Park Boulevard, we get stopped like almost every day now, especially during COVID, from my wife's former students and from some of my former students. It's because we're able to reach out to a wide variety of people, or peoples rather. But I don't, and this is, I don't want to criticize the board on this, but I just don't think it's in their nature to see black and brown families.
We're running out of time, but I do want to, you've mentioned your wife and
Yep.
her teaching
Yeah.
role. I want to address the question of your service on the Board of Trustees
Yeah.
while she is an employee of the district.
Yeah.
To what extent is that limit your ability to participate in various issues before the board?
Yeah, not at all. I did a little bit of research on this, and she can't come up for any demotion, I believe, but she certainly can't come up for any promotion during my time in the board. Number one, and she's just one of hundreds of teachers, and of course, I would be more worried that I'm pro-teacher. I was a California Teachers Association member just this year in 2020. I started out my career as a teacher. I never intended to become a principal. I always wanted to be a teacher, just like my mom, just like my wife. So no, there would be no conflict any more than John F. Kennedy was conflicted about his Roman Catholicism.
I assume that if you were the superintendent of the school district and someone like you, married to a teacher, a former principal,
Yep.
someone who wanted to be a county superintendent,
Yep.
was running for school board, that would give you pause. So what would you do if you were elected to overcome the potential for your being viewed by the superintendent as a very challenging board member to have to interact with?
Do you really mean pause, or do you mean fear? I think you're being nice and saying pause. No, I've actually, that's the best thing about, this is my third campaign. The best thing about campaigning is really the people you meet. I've met a couple of Palo students, and they're changing my mind about 16 and under voting. But to your question, superintendent will have nothing to fear for me. In fact, I wouldn't be as bold as a couple of those members were with McGee saying, hey, you're out of here publicly. That's not my MO. I don't think anyone has anything to fear from me. I think, though, they're going to be forced to confront someone who shares the same agenda items with them, but also some other items in terms of equity and diversity. Someone who says, you know what, we need to actually talk about that. We need to actually do something about that. That's what's missing from the board right now.
Great, thank you very much.
All right.
Matt Nagle,
you.
good luck to you.
Thanks.